So this workshop, which I've been doing last week with the animal leadership team, the title was Rebuilding DEI at a Time of Backlash Using System Thinking. And the workshop is based on a book by Shakil Chaudhry, who was also one of the trainers. And the book was called Deep Diversity, came out in 2021. And maybe some of you have heard of that book. It's a very, thorough and really deep dive into this subject. And I've learned quite a lot of new things. And some of those things I'd like to share with you today as a reflection, for taking us into a deeper meditation on this. And the book is based on Shakil Chaudhry's journey, quite confusing and painful journey when he came to Canada with his immigrant parents as a small child from Asia. And he remembers, that he always wanted to be white because he wanted to fit in with the dominant culture. And he was, deeply struggling to come to terms with his need for belonging. And, this journey is still going on today for him, of course, because it's never really finished. But through this, the pressure of the suffering and the confusion and the wanting to understand what he was experiencing, he, together with his wife and the team of animal leadership, have developed an educational system, for all who are interested to also, dive into that journey. And, the basic underlying direction where it's all going is expanding perception. What we are already doing in these gatherings here on Wednesdays, expanding perception through including the more than human world. And this workshop was doing the same thing in regards to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And some of the highlights, of what I've learned, I'd like to share with you. For example, that bias is hardwired into our bodies. It's in our DNA, and it's because it's useful for survival. And they call it the brain is an anticipation machine, because the brain always tries to make sense with what a person is experiencing, to just make some kind of sense so we know what to do next. And there's often a lot of misunderstandings and generalizations, of course, and that's what bias is all about. And then they also spoke about identity, that we are having the sense of belonging is a key driver for human behavior, and is also very, very deeply rooted in our evolutionary history. And, we're speaking about in-groups and out-groups. And what's really, pretty intense to understand is he was explaining, that information about in-groups and information about out-groups are processed in different parts of the brain. And, information about out-groups is processed in the same part of the brain as information about things. And information about in-group, the people who are dear and close to us, is processed in a different part of the brain. So that makes it quite clear, where there's often this tendency to dehumanize out-groups, and there's no empathy there. And I think it's really good to understand that this is not like a personal failing of anybody. It's not an individual failing, but it's our evolutionary luggage, which we need to learn to understand and also interrupt. And was the main thrust, I think, of the workshop, is to understand the status quo, to understand our situation, and then, put practices in place to help us to interrupt that knee-jerk reaction. So that was really, really powerful. I think those two things were the most powerful information about the hardware, and of course, socialization also plays a role, but through meditation, and through inquiry, we can self-socialize. We can ours without anybody else, necessarily educating us in our close field. We can put that into place through mindfulness and through compassion. And they also spoke about that neutrality is actually supporting the status quo, and neutrality is not the same as non-polarization. And non-polarization is the capacity to hold multiple truths at the same time, while also having the awareness of power, holding the polarization, but at the same time knowing, maybe one group has much more power than the other group and oppresses the other group. So, after going through that workshop, it becomes very clear it's not just a cognitive problem, it's much more complicated. It's much more messy than that. And, to learn to go beyond binary thinking is a messy affair. And, learning some of those things, how many of us white people, how they respond is with what's called white fragility, which is a way of feeling guilty, feeling blamed, feeling quite defensive, or getting really depressed and feeling bad about ourselves. And, to hold that is also part of the journey, to stay with that, and to know beyond any doubt that fear is a part of growth. And if we can stay with that fear or the aversion, then slowly but surely more space becomes available. And through the spaciousness, if it's done in the right way, if it's not spacing out, but if it's a real creation of space to be with what is, then more precision, becomes available, and also more softness and more warmth, through the Brahma Viharas, metta, loving kindness, and compassion, equanimity, in particular those three. And that helps us, also to open up the space even more and to allow that digesting, metabolizing to happen, so that the information can slowly but surely be integrated and becomes part of who we are. And then, if white fragility arises, which will arise again and again, there's no longer the sense of, it's me because I'm bad, but it's more like that's part of the journey, and we have a name for it, and we can meet it, and we can understand, the aversion to it, and make space for the aversion as well. And I think that's, the kind of guided meditation I'd like to share for today. So, please find a posture which works for you for about 45 minutes. And maybe some of you already had some kind of triggering when you heard me speaking about some of those things. I can feel it already myself, when I hear the term white fragility. I remember, certain situations where I felt really pretty hope and helpless, about all of this. And just really knowing this is just part of the journey. And Shakil Chaudhry, who wrote this book, Deep Diversity, that what motivated him, because he was so confused. He didn't understand those different, reactions and things which were coming up in him. He was just, I think, 5 years old or 6 years old when it all started. But he stayed with it, he stayed with it and he became an expert on it. And now he teaches, tons, thousands of people in huge organizations and in small organizations because he has stayed with it and has metabolized a lot. And now he can share with others what he has learned. And he makes a living of it as well. So it's amazing what can happen, if we have the capacity to stay with the experience without manipulating it and allowing the experience to teach us by holding it in such a way that it can teach us. That's what I'd like to emphasize here too on those Wednesday gatherings, to pull out different threads and then allow them to teach us. And using some of the early Buddhist core teachings, to give us a handle on all of this. And the teachings of the earth to give us a grounding inside all of this. So we can allow the process to happen. And sometimes we're going to shut down. And sometimes, we're going to try to make it something else than what it is. And that also can be acknowledged and seen. So, becoming aware what brought you here today. And taking it in that you have the privilege to do this. No matter where you are in Europe, it's maybe 6 o'clock in the evening or 5 o'clock, depending where you are. Or here in America, you have the time and the space, the opportunity to work on yourself. That alone, is to notice that consciously is already bread. And then, becoming aware of the gravity which gently pulls us towards the ground and the soil underneath the ground where we are sitting. The earth, and we have emerged from her through the mediation of our mothers. We are like a plant, really. Emerging out of the earth and eventually returning at one point. And with the out breath, we can put down some roots into the earth without any pressure, only if it works for you. Same thing in this deep connectedness. The earth is made from the same elements as our bodies. There's no difference. And through eating, drinking, breathing, going to the bathroom, crying, sweating, there's a constant exchange of those different elements between our body and the body of the planet. And that's really amazing to consider. Just opens up the mind. The deep kinship with the modern human world. And then also with the in-breath, sensing the stability and the stillness, the vastness of the body of the earth from which we have come on a physical level. Sensing into the vibrancy, the aliveness of that body of ours. Which is in constant communication with the aliveness of the body of the planet as well. Just need to put the right framework into place, and then we can access that, the truth. Then we know that on this planet there is so many different expressions of humanity. Different skin colors, different hair qualities, different shapes of the eyes. So people have come forth, from this planet in different expressions. The land, has given birth to different forms of humanity and many, many different languages and cultures, lifestyles. And over the last few hundred years, the people with the white skin color have increasingly dominated the planet, at least on a material level. And they have wreaked a lot of havoc, a lot of harm, a lot of pain, a lot of inequity, betrayal, lots of not so good things have happened. Slavery and land stealing and all of it. And that's also part of our truth. And this incapacity to empathize with the outgroup is at the root of that harm which has been done. And it's an old evolutionary adjustment, which was somehow needed, to bring the species into the future thousands and thousands of years ago. Species Homo sapiens. Sapiens is here for about 200,000 years, but pre-Homo species, different expressions of humanity, they are in process since about 2 million years, really. Homo erectus, Homo habilis. There was always that very tight groups, small groups of people, and everything else was out. And we need to wake up to that for our own survival. Just noticing, how it feels in the body to hear this, and really gently breathing into that without any manipulation, just making the space for it to settle more deeply in, and feeling whatever is triggered. The discomfort, the stretching. They were always speaking about stretching but not tearing. Stretching but not tearing. That's a secret, of expanding perception, is exactly that, with kindness, metta, karuna, compassion, breathing into the contractions, into the body, sense of burning and pressure, stretching but not tearing. And then, we can even bring up the classic sentence for compassion, karuna, one of the four Brahma Viharas. May all beings be free from harm and the intention to harm. Noticing, how the heart responds to that sentence. May all beings be free from harm and the intention to harm. Even, we have these inbuilt biases, which are, if they are unchecked, they can be extremely harmful. And that's the situation we are in. We have those biases in the hardware. We need to get to know it so we can interrupt it in a skillful way. Not by chopping it up, but with kindness, with compassion, allowing it to dissolve. That's the way to go. May all beings be free from harm and the intention to harm. And you might notice, there's a little bit more space in the body as we are allowing this to happen. Just a little bit more space. And that's the Brahma Viharas, that's what they offer, spaciousness. And confidence in impermanence. That's what awareness, mindfulness offers. The seeing of change, beginning, middle, and end. May all beings be free from harm and the intention to harm. And sensing the quality of compassion, karuna in the heart area. And you're gently allowing the energy to radiate out in front of you without any pressure. Almost like you're removing a curtain and allowing the light to shine as far as it wants to. May all beings be free from harm and the intention to harm. And then allowing the compassion, karuna, also to radiate out to one side, gently pulling away the curtain even a bit more. And towards the back as well, allowing the compassion to radiate out behind us as well. And to the other side. All around us. Above and below. Noticing the spaciousness and the quality of compassion. Which permeates that spaciousness. All around us, above and below, sitting in an orb of compassion. And then you're becoming aware more of the spaciousness and letting go of the compassion element. Just becoming aware of the limitless space which doesn't end at the walls of the room. And if you're distracted in any way, just returning to the compassion. And the intention to be free from harm and wishing to others the same. And becoming aware, of the vastness of the mind. The limitlessness of the mind. And then, also letting go of the spaciousness and just being aware of that which knows about the spaciousness. Like almost making a U-turn, no longer having an object, but conscious knowing, conscious awareness. Being that. Like the reflective capacity of a mirror. Being that. We call that also refuge in Buddha in this teaching. So consciously knowing sounds, knowing thoughts, knowing touches, and so on. And in particular, knowing the changingness of all of those. There's no more object, only subject. Consciously knowing. Empty of any objects. And seeing the impermanence of all of this, which often, sends us into reaction. Just really seeing the impermanence. And staying with the refuge, the knowing, Buddha. Staying as that. And, being witness to the changingness of it all can't be pinned down. Letting go of any identification with this process, even with the subject. Just knowing. And consciously, opening ourselves to insight. Is there anything I need to know right now? Is there an update for me? Anything more to include in my perspective? I'm here. I'm available. I'm listening. I'm sensing. Really have that intention very clearly. It's openness. Sense of respect and urge to evolve into a more expanded version of ourselves. And continued, growing up and waking up. As perception expands through including new information, which comes to us if there is the intention. So we're really sensing into the opening, however that comes to you, opening above the head, crown chakra, opening the heart, opening awareness, this intention to allow more unmanifest potential to come through for us. And trusting the urge to evolve, to be calling us into what we can be. Opening up yet unmanifest potential. And through, repetition, it becomes more and more intuitive and less abstract. Not overthinking it, allowing it to happen. And sensing into the vibrancy of that spaciousness, the aliveness. That spark of evolution we all carry inside of ourselves. And paying conscious attention to that is our contribution. Connecting with our calling, our medicine, what we have come to offer into this process. And it's a call and response. It's a practice, really. It's not a thing, it's a flow, a process, an unfolding. And we are standing on the shoulders of our ancestors. And offering our contribution to future generations to have a place to land here. And once we start seeing all of this in a different framework, our capacity for devotion and dedication and letting go into this process starts to become more tangible. There's a more sense of connecting with our innermost request, what really matters for us. It gives us a sense of grounding and safety in the midst of the messiness of the process. Becoming part of the immune system of the planet. And trusting, that we have that connection, because otherwise we wouldn't be here. Nobody is born here on this planet which has not emerged out of the planet through a mother. It just doesn't work any other way for humans. That's the way it is. We just need to reconnect with that truth. Clearing away the filters, the trauma, the confusion. Consistently working and integrating and digesting. It's a process. Just like Shaquille, who was a 5-year-old boy when he came to Canada with his parents and went through a lot of struggle for many, many years. And now, he has developed a medicine which he can share with others. He's become an expert. But it hasn't come to him just or as a package. He had to stay with the pain and the innermost request. And then it happened. And it took time. 30 years, 40 years, whatever, however long it took him to get where he is now. So in a moment or so, I want to ring the bell.